This car's slow, mate.
Okay, copy. Okay, so we now have a black or white flag for track limits. Turn 10.
They can't keep it on the track, the car won't turn. Signs went off at turn 7. That's completely off at turn 9. That's completely off at turn 10. Yes, you got a penalty yet? This guy's been off every single time. Turn 10 again.
Copy.
Lewis, they're all gonna get penalties in front of you, all of them, so keep going.
Is there a reason why stewards haven't given those penalties yet?
They're still dishing out warnings and penalties.
Lewis, the car is bad, we know. Please drive it.
Mercedes had nothing short of a terrible weekend at the Red Bull Ring, where George Russell and Lewis Hamilton were only able to drive to a 7-8 finish, resulting in only gaining 11 points of a possible 59 during the sprint weekend. 7-time world champion Hamilton even ended 49 seconds behind winner Max Verstappen. This doesn't look good for Mercedes at all. What has happened to the team that looked on its way back? And what is there to expect for Silverstone? The race where Mercedes will again apply another update to their car. To make the Austrian GP result even worse, this all happened despite Mercedes bringing a radical improvement for the last Monaco GP, which resulted in a double podium in Spain, ahead of Hamilton taking third in Canada. Wasn't this upgrade supposed to save Mercedes' season? This result even happened with Lewis Hamilton starting 5th on the grid, which seemed promising, but what a race he and Mercedes had. Its story was most effectively summed up by Toto Wolff's radio interventions, his second being a very stern, "Lewis, the car is bad, we know. Please drive it." That was in reaction to Hamilton's question about suspected track limit violations by rivals, opponents he just didn't have the pace to keep up with. Hamilton's 7th became 8th after the post-race penalties were applied, adding to his misery. Though the fact that it didn't change Mercedes' points haul, his demotion merely elevated Russell, demonstrated that Mercedes still doesn't have the definitive edge in the battle to be second behind Red Bull. Thus, Lewis Hamilton finished 8th in the Austrian Grand Prix, capping off a difficult weekend for Mercedes. After being informed of a black and white flag, the Mercedes driver was heard on the team radio complaining that it was difficult to operate the car inside the track limits. He was eventually given a time penalty before going on a rant over team radio about other drivers, notably Sergio Perez straying off track. Hamilton blames the difficulty of driving the W14 inside the track's restrictions to a setup choice taken ahead of the race to aid with car balance. "I took a lot of front wing because we knew we had a really bad rear end here, so I took it out to maintain that balance and go long," he told media. "I massively underestimated it, and I was almost full lock at the final corners. Going into turn 10, it was just sliding." Both Norris and Perez were heard complaining about Hamilton going off track, but the Mercedes driver felt his rivals were committing similar offences. "As soon as he got past me, he went off at least 10 times, and so did Perez. He went off at turn 9 and turn 10 and didn't get a penalty." In addition to Ferrari, McLaren updated their car in Austria, allowing Lando Norris to stay comfortably ahead of Hamilton throughout the weekend. Throughout the weekend, the 7-time world champion has been left perplexed by their lack of speed. "I definitely didn't expect us to be as bad. I don't really have an answer for it," he explained. "The feeling of the car was very much the same as we've had over the last year, but compared to the last two races are way better." Mercedes intends to bring additional changes to the upcoming race in Silverstone as part of their upgrading program. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff claimed that his radio involvement during the Austria Grand Prix was just to calm things down during a challenging weekend for the team. Because of Hamilton's annoyance, Wolff chose to make an unusual radio transmission in an attempt to keep the Briton focused on the race. When questioned why he made the radio call, Wolff said it was in the best interests of the team. "I wanted to just make sure that we were making the best out of the package and just giving it the best shot that we had," Wolff explained to media. "But only for the best interest of the drivers and the team, and sometimes you have moments where you need to calm things down." Mercedes would have had greater hopes for the race at the Red Bull Ring with a freshly modified W14 car. But despite the added sprint race, they finished the weekend with just 11 points, the least fortunate weekend total of the season. It was a bruising day. We couldn't make the car quick. We saw it from Friday onwards that we were lacking a couple of tenths or a bit more, Wolff added. I think the swings are quite interesting. One weekend it's us who are the first challenger to the Red Bull, and then it's Ferrari, and then it's Aston Martin, and this time we were on the back end of the group. We're sitting there for 90 minutes trying to optimize a strategy or getting the best of the drivers, but there's just no inherent pace. It was a tough 90 minutes for us. I think we were predicting that Montreal would not be ideal, and it was surprisingly good. Then in Austria, we thought that the high-speed performance would save our non-performance in the low-speed corners, but it never did. The car was never in the right place. We suffered from all the conditions, from understeer to oversteer. It was never any good. Andrew Chauvelin, Mercedes trackside engineering director, was on board with Wolff's words about the race, stating the following: "There's lots for us to improve on leaving here. The performance clearly hasn't been good enough. We need to understand how much is down to not landing the setup in the right place, and how much is just base performance. We've not brought any updates to the last few races, so it's also possible we're lacking development. We've got plans in place to address that, but the gap to Ferrari was certainly a worry today." The situation with track limits was difficult. The notifications were coming in after the fact, so Lewis ended up with a penalty before we could do anything about it. We're happy that we've only got to wait a few days before getting back on track. We need to work hard to understand the areas that need improvement, but we're looking forward to Silverstone and putting this race behind us. But it left a bitter feeling amongst the drivers, with Lewis being in bad spirits all weekend. And Russell stated that the squad was taken aback by the slide back down the order, since the speed was substantially worse than expected. I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it, but we still have the same car as we had 2 races ago in Barcelona, when we were flying. So the only thing that's probably different is the tyres, something we need to understand, Russell said. It definitely doesn't feel as we want it to. The car's moving around a lot, a little bit worse than all of the other circuits, but the pace was substantially worse than we were expecting. Mercedes even finished behind 2 powertrain customer cars, with McLaren's Lando Norris finishing 4th, ahead of Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso in 5th, after Sainz collected a penalty after the race ended. Russell, who with Alonso was the only driver not to be flagged for exceeding track limits during the 71-lap race, said in the media pen, "We took a big step backwards, and Lando and McLaren were a big surprise for us. So they clearly got it right. We have a fast car in certain circumstances. We just need to understand why we didn't this weekend." So what can we expect from Mercedes for the drivers' home race? Will they be able to even come close to the podium this upcoming weekend? At least they'll bring another update, which we'll fill you in on later this week. Let us know your predictions for Mercedes drivers this weekend in the comments below. Another subject that rises every time Mercedes has a bad weekend is Lewis Hamilton's contract status. And this weekend was no exception to this rule. Throughout the Austrian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton repeatedly asked over the team radio how others were breaching track limits. Along with this, the former world champion emphasized how tough it was for him to remain within the lines with the tricky-to-drive Mercedes. Lewis was everything but happy during the weekend. This resulted in Toto Wolff getting on the radio twice to react to Hamilton. The Brit had been moaning about his car for almost a year and a half. And with no new contract in sight and the constant crying, the question is valid. Isn't it best for Hamilton and Mercedes to split ways? Lewis Hamilton has stated several times that he wishes to remain with Mercedes, although he's yet to renew his contract. It's easy to see Wolff becoming bored of the world's most successful drivers grumbling at some times. After all, continuously complaining about how horrible the Mercedes is not good for the German brand's marketing. Wolff, on the other hand, is aware of Hamilton's abilities. If the Briton leaves, there's no one who comes close to matching his qualities as a substitute. Thus, Toto Wolff has said his radio messages at Lewis Hamilton during the Austrian Grand Prix will have no impact on the British driver's Mercedes future. "No, not at all," said Wolff. "You should hear us talking on the phone and meeting each other. That was nothing. We've had a bad weekend, all of us in the team, and that just makes us stronger. It was only for the best interest of the driver and the team. Sometimes there's a certain moment when you need to calm things down, but I meant well. We had a lot of discussion about track limits and whether they were enforced or not. I wanted to make sure we were getting the best out of the package that wasn't performing, and trying to give it our best shot. Does this mean Lewis Hamilton will stay at Mercedes after this season? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. One thing is certain, Mercedes must hope their upgrade coming this weekend will make them competitive again, because this season has taught us that one upgrade can change the whole order of the grid. But with updates coming left and right across the grid, we're up for some more changes in pecking order in the upcoming weeks. What are your thoughts about the Austrian Grand Prix? Thanks for watching today's video, and we'll see you in the next one.